The discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb is regarded as perhaps the most spectacular and significant archaeological find in the history of ancient Egypt. Then there's the lost city of Tanis, which Brian Handwerk described as a place whose treasures rival those of King Tut's. But just because we've made countless important discoveries over the years doesn't mean every last secret of ancient Egypt has been found. In fact, within just the past few years, archaeologists have made spectacular discoveries that have given us even deeper insight into the lives of the ancient Egyptians. In this video, we'll show you 15 of the greatest archaeological discoveries of ancient Egypt that changed what we know about one of history's most phenomenal civilizations. Number 15. The ancient Egyptian meteorite beads. There was a time when iron was far more valuable than gold in Egypt. Not because it was glossy, not because it was rare, but because it came from the sky. The ancient Egyptians even had a word for it that translates to metal from heaven. Long before they learned how to smelt iron, they were already shaping this heavenly material into objects reserved for royals. In 1911, archaeologists excavating a cemetery at Gerzeh, about 70 kilometers south of Cairo, found 9 small iron beads inside predynastic burials dating to around 3200 BC. And it was their age that raised a difficult question. Egypt wouldn't begin making smelted iron for another 2,000 years. So where had these beads come from? For decades, no one could give a definite answer. Early chemical studies hinted that the metal might have originated from meteorites because of its nickel content, but the evidence remained uncertain. It wasn't until 2013, when experts looked at the beads with scanning technology, that the mystery was finally solved. Their composition matched iron meteorites, proving the metal had literally fallen from space. The same discovery also strengthened a long-standing theory about the famous iron dagger buried with King Tut. Scientists did more tests, which confirmed that its blade was forged from meteoritic iron as well. Number 14. The Forgotten Pyramid of Zoyet el-Aryan. When German Egyptologist Carl Richard Lepsius discovered the unfinished northern pyramid of Zoyet el-Aryan in 1842, he found a site that barely looked like the pyramids most people picture when they think of ancient Egypt. Instead of a completed monument, nearly all the work had gone into the ground. A huge T-shaped excavation cut through the limestone led to a chamber about 21 meters below the surface. Its floor wasn't left as natural rock. Builders covered it with massive blocks of rose granite brought from Aswan, hundreds of kilometers away. When Italian archaeologist Alessandro Barsanti excavated the chamber years later, he wrote that the granite blocks had been joined with exceptional precision, creating a perfectly smooth surface. Set into the middle was an oval granite sarcophagus carved from a single block of stone. Unlike the royal coffins found in other Old Kingdom pyramids, this one still had its lime plaster seal intact. But when it was opened, there was no mummy, burial equipment, or even human remains. Around the excavation, unused stone blocks and construction debris suggested the project had stopped before it was finished. Because the area has remained under military control for decades, archaeologists still haven't been able to carry out the modern surveys that might finally explain why this magnificent Egyptian pyramid was never completed. Number 13. The tomb of the Silver Pharaoh. Egypt was ruled by the pharaohs, who represented the divine on earth. And some of the most famous were Tutankhamun, Ramesses II, and Seti I. But have you ever heard of Susen I? In 1939, French archaeologist Pierre Montet found his untouched royal tomb at Tanis in the Nile Delta, making it one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in Egyptian history. Unlike most royal burials, this one had escaped ancient grave robbers for nearly 3,000 years. The biggest surprise wasn't the gold, it was silver. Susen's was buried inside a solid silver coffin. a material that was actually rarer and often considered more valuable than gold in Egypt because it had to be imported from distant regions such as Anatolia. Inside the silver sarcophagus rested another coffin decorated with gold, along with a magnificent funerary mask made of gold and lapis lazuli. The discovery challenged the long-held belief that Egypt's 21st dynasty was a poor and declining period. This tomb never got the attention it deserved because it was discovered just as the Second World War began. Even today, Susen I remains one of ancient Egypt's wealthiest yet least-known pharaohs, despite leaving behind one of its richest royal burials. Number 12. The Palermo stone. This stone is regarded as one of the oldest surviving historical records from ancient Egypt. It takes its name from Palermo, where it first appeared in 1877, even though the monument itself is unquestionably Egyptian. The surviving piece records events from Egypt's first 5 dynasties, beginning around 2925 BCE and continuing to 2325 BCE. If that dating is correct, whoever carved it was also recording events believed to have happened nearly 6 centuries earlier. Whether those early accounts were completely accurate or had already become embellished is still open to debate. What survives today is only a small portion of the original monument. Researchers believe the complete stone measured about 6 feet in length and probably stood inside a temple. Among its best-known inscriptions is Pharaoh Sneferu's campaign in Nubia, where he is said to have returned with 7,000 captives and 2,000 cattle. Those figures may be accurate, or they may simply reflect royal propaganda. It's still a mystery how it reached Sicily, but it remains one of the most important sources for reconstructing the earliest chapters of Egyptian history, from its rulers and military campaigns to religious ceremonies and temple life. Number 11. Egyptian women with striking tattoos. Tattoos are meant to tell a story. Today, they can represent memories, beliefs, or personal identity. But thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt, they carried a meaning that reached far beyond decoration. In 2014, archaeologists studying human remains from the workers' village of Deir el-Medina, near the Valley of the Kings, identified a well-preserved female mummy covered with dozens of tattoos. The designs included sacred symbols tied to the goddess Hathor, wadjet eyes, baboons, and lotus flowers. Because of the number and placement of these markings, researchers suggested she may have served as a religious figure or priestess. The discovery became even more important a few years later. By 2019, 6 more tattooed women from the same community had been examined, revealing that body art was far more common than historians had once believed. Instead of being limited to a small group of elite women, tattoos appear to have been part of everyday life for many people living in the village. They expressed religious devotion, but they also helped define a person's identity within the community. These discoveries changed a long-standing belief about tattooing in ancient Egypt, showing it was not simply an unusual tradition reserved for a privileged few, but a meaningful part of ordinary life as well. Number 10. The so-called Tomb of God. How do you explain a tomb belonging to someone who was never supposed to be a human ruler? That's the question many people asked after reports spread in 2015 about the so-called Tomb of Osiris. The discovery was made at Sheikh Abd el-Qurna, part of the ancient necropolis on the west bank of Thebes. Dating back around 3,200 years, the tomb is huge, but there was no inscription that tells archaeologists who it was built for. A broad hall supported by 5 pillars leads to a stairway carved into solid bedrock, ending in chambers that closely resemble scenes connected with the legend of Osiris. According to Egyptian mythology, Osiris was betrayed by his brother Seth, sealed inside a chest, and later cut into 14 pieces. Isis searched across Egypt, recovered the remains, and buried each piece in a different sacred place. Could this have been one of those shrines? Many think so. Was any part of Osiris ever really buried here? Number 9. The Zagreb Mummy's Linen Book. If there's one thing that archaeologists never expected to find inside an ancient Egyptian mummy, it was the longest surviving text written in the Etruscan language. The story began in the 19th century, when a Croatian official brought an Egyptian mummy back to Zagreb as a souvenir. Years later, after the linen wrappings were removed and placed in a museum, experts noticed that the cloth was covered in writing. It turned out to be the Liber Linteus Zagrabiensis, the only known linen book to survive from the ancient world and the longest Etruscan text ever discovered. Originally more than 3 meters long, the cloth had been cut into strips and reused to wrap an Egyptian woman named Nessie Hensu, who lived during the Ptolemaic period. Ironically, that decision preserved a document that would likely have disappeared forever in Italy's damp climate. Although Etruscan remains only partly understood, scholars have identified the text as a religious calendar containing ceremonies, offerings, and the names of many gods. How an important Etruscan sacred book ended up inside an Egyptian burial is still debated. It may have been sold as discarded linen, or it could have belonged to an Etruscan family living in Egypt. Number 8. The Geyer-Anderson cat. Most people picture giant pyramids or golden masks when they think of ancient Egypt. But one of its finest treasures is small enough to fit in your hands. The Geyer-Anderson cat is a bronze statue from Egypt's late period, dating to around 600 BCE. Barely 6 inches tall, the little figure is covered with gold ornaments and sacred jewelry, including a protective Wedjat amulet. A scarab rests on its head, while another winged scarab stretches across its chest, linking the statue to the cat goddess Bastet. After more than 2,600 years, you'd expect time to have left its mark. Surprisingly, it almost hides it. X-rays reveal deep cracks running around much of the body, leaving the head dangerously close to breaking away. Only hidden reinforcements keep everything together. The repairs were carried out in the 1930s by Major Geyer-Anderson, the man who later donated it to the British Museum. He also removed thick layers of verdigris and reddish patina, bringing back much of its original appearance. For such a tiny object, it carries an incredible amount of history, craftsmanship, and quiet mystery. So, what's your take on it? Number 7. Ancient Egyptian brain drain. The Persian king Cambyses conquered Egypt in 525 BC, capturing Memphis and bringing the country under Persian rule for nearly a century. But he didn't just take control of the kingdom. Ancient writers, including Diodorus Siculus, claim that many of Egypt's finest craftsmen and skilled artisans were taken to Persia, where they worked on royal projects such as the palace at Susa under Darius I. A coffin examined in 2014 may preserve the consequences of that loss. Dating to the Persian occupation, it carries artwork so poorly executed that some archaeologists initially suspected it was a modern forgery. Scientific testing, however, identified the famous pigment known as Egyptian blue, confirming its authenticity. The coffin is filled with strangely drawn figures, including falcons resembling fish, awkward canopic jars representing the sons of Horus, an odd image of a bed with the head of the deity Ba, and Hathor wearing a snake-type crown unlike any normally seen in Egyptian art. Together, these details suggest that Egypt's artistic standards declined badly after many of its skilled craftsmen were taken away by the Persian Empire. Number 6. The headless pharaoh of Hazor. We've identified many Egyptian pharaohs, but certainly not every one of them. The stone head you see here belongs to a ruler whose identity has never been confirmed. Carved roughly 4,300 years ago, it was found at Hazor, an ancient city in what is now northern Israel. Archaeologists believe it was sculpted during the same period the Great Pyramids were rising in Egypt, before being shattered during Hazar's destruction. Often associated with Joshua's campaign around 3,300 years ago. Its curled royal wig and the uraeus, the sacred cobra on the forehead, leave little room for doubt that the figure represented a pharaoh, since those symbols were reserved exclusively for Egyptian kings. The mystery begins where the sculpture ends. Although the head survived, the rest of the statue has never been recovered. Egyptian objects discovered throughout Hazar point to close political or cultural ties between the city and Egypt, despite Hazar never becoming Egyptian territory. Even today, that relationship remains uncertain, just like the name of the king whose face endured while the rest of his monument disappeared into history. Number 5. Statues of Amun as a Ram. If you walked into the Temple of Amun at Kawa more than 2,600 years ago, these would have been among the first things to catch your eye. At least 3 great statues of the god Amun, shown as a ram, once watched over the temple while sheltering King Taharqa, the ruler who began building the stone sanctuary around 683 BCE. To the ancient Egyptians, the ram wasn't just another animal. It was one of Amun's sacred symbols, which is why ram-headed sphinxes and ram statues appeared at many of his temples. These examples came to light during excavations led by Professor Francis Llewellyn Griffith between 1930 and 1931. One was later given to the British Museum in 1933, where it still remains. It shows the ram resting peacefully with its legs folded beneath its body, while the small figure of Taharqa stands safely below its head. A hollow on top once held a gilded sun disk, and the hieroglyphs carved below identify the king as the son of Amun and Mut. The other 2 statues are now preserved in the museum. Number 4. King Sonakht. The first giant of Egypt. Almost every ancient civilization has stories about giants. Egypt might not have needed legends at all. King Sonakht, a pharaoh of the 3rd dynasty who ruled around 4,700 years ago, has long puzzled researchers for one remarkable reason: his height. When his skeletal remains were discovered near Beit Khalaf in 1901, archaeologists were astonished by his massive frame. Sonakht stood about 6 feet 6 inches tall, an extraordinary height in the ancient world. At a time when most Egyptian men measured a little over 5 feet 6 inches, he would have towered above almost everyone he met. Even Ramses II, often described as unusually tall, is thought to have stood only about 5 feet 9 inches. Modern examinations of Sonakht's bones suggest he most likely suffered from gigantism, making him the earliest known documented case in history. Could that explain why Egyptian tradition occasionally speaks of towering men? It's certainly possible. Number 3. The Hekhenakht papyri. Most ancient Egyptian discoveries tell us about pharaohs, temples, or royal tombs. These tell a very different story. The Hekhenakht papyri, often called the Hekhenakht letters, were written nearly 4,000 years ago during Egypt's early Middle Kingdom. They were discovered inside the tomb complex of Vizier Ipi after becoming mixed with the rubble used to move the coffin of a servant named Messe into the burial chamber. The collection includes letters and financial records written by or for a Ka priest named Hekhenakht. Rather than focusing on religion alone, they reveal the everyday business of managing land, workers, and money. The texts explain that rent and taxes were commonly paid to the pharaoh in grain, especially barley. Hekhenakht carefully worked out those values before converting them into oil, copper, or textiles whenever necessary, allowing different goods to be exchanged fairly. Simple as they may seem, these records have become one of the clearest windows into ancient Egyptian life. They also preserve surprisingly advanced mathematical ideas, including fractions and accounting methods that suggest Egypt's economy was far more sophisticated than historians once believed. Number 2. The wooden tablets of Akhmim people often credit the ancient Egyptians for their pyramids, but their knowledge of mathematics was just as impressive. Few discoveries prove that better than the Akhmim wooden tablets, aka the Cairo wooden tablets. These two surviving wooden boards are covered with arithmetic exercises and owe their remarkable preservation to a layer of protective plaster. One tablet even carries a dated inscription year 38, giving researchers an important clue about when it was produced. Both boards list the names of servants, followed by a series of surprisingly difficult mathematical problems. Some scholars believe the exercises were used to test whether those people were intellectually capable of entering service. If that's true, the standard was anything but easy. One division problem proved so difficult that its correct solution wasn't confirmed until 1906. Later studies also uncovered a few simple calculation mistakes, including two examples where 2 multiplied by 7 was written as 13 instead of 14. Those slips may have belonged to someone who failed the test. Whatever the explanation, these tablets show that Egyptian mathematics was practical, highly organized, and far more sophisticated than we imagine. Number 1. The Temple of Ptolemy IV Egypt is practically one enormous archaeological site. Yet some discoveries happen in the most unexpected ways. History isn't always revealed by archaeologists with brushes and trowels. Sometimes, it appears because someone was simply digging in the wrong place. That was exactly what happened in 2019 when construction workers in Tarna Sohag were drilling a sewage line and suddenly hit big stone blocks. What they had stumbled upon was the long-lost Temple of Ptolemy IV, hidden beneath the ground for more than 2,200 years. Once experts arrived, the value of the find became clear. Ptolemy IV was never celebrated as one of Egypt's greatest rulers. He gained a reputation for preferring lavish entertainment and artistic pursuits over governing his kingdom. Perhaps that's one reason his temple slipped quietly into history, standing away from the major settlements on the Nile's western bank. Even so, he dreamed on a grand scale. He ordered the construction of the Tessera Conteres, the largest human-powered ship ever built, requiring more than 4,000 rowers. In the end, one of his greatest monuments returned to the surface because of a routine construction project rather than a planned dig. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.